The email hit my inbox like a punch to the gut. Not the email itself, but the attachments, screenshots from some local community group Elizabeth, my mother, frequented. Maureen refused the family home. One post read, her words dripping with manufactured sorrow. She just walked away from it all. I'm Maureen, I'm 32, and I walked away from a lot of things 14 years ago, but the family home wasn't one of them. I was 18 when I packed a single suitcase and bought a one-way ticket across the country. My mother, Elizabeth, then 44, had made it clear for years that I was a burden, a disappointment, and that my presence was an inconvenience. Moving out wasn't a choice, it was a desperate escape. For years I'd kept her at arm's length. A polite, infrequent phone call, a forced smile at a distant cousin's wedding, but mostly silence. It was the only way to protect myself from the insidious way she twisted reality, a skill she'd honed since my childhood. I remember one Christmas, I was maybe 10. I'd spent weeks making her a lopsided clay mug in art class. I was so proud. I presented it to her beaming. She took it, examined it, and then set it down with a sigh. "Oh, honey," she'd said, her voice dripping with pity, "you know I only drink from porcelain." But it's the thought that counts, I guess. Later that day, she told my aunt, loud enough for me to hear, "Maureen just doesn't understand what I like. She's always been a bit unobservant." My mug ended up in the back of a cupboard, forgotten. She never yelled, never screamed. She just made you feel like your existence was a fundamental misunderstanding of her needs. That was Elizabeth. The screenshots were from Olive, my cousin, who's 29 now. Olive was one of the few family members who still spoke to me, and even fewer who ever questioned Elizabeth's narrative. "Hey, saw this," Olive's message read. "Thought you should know, she's really laying it on thick." I stared at Elizabeth's words, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. Refused the family home? The house I grew up in, the one my grandparents had owned before her, the one I'd always loved despite the emotional minefield it contained. The house she'd always promised would be ours someday. It was a lie, of course. Everything with Elizabeth was a lie, carefully constructed to make her the victim, the long-suffering matriarch. But this lie felt different. It felt bolder, more public. "What is she even talking about?" I typed back to Olive, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "I haven't talked to her about the house in years. She never offered it to me." Olive replied almost instantly. "I know, right? But she's telling everyone you were offered it multiple times and you just didn't want the responsibility. She's even saying she had to sell it because you abandoned her." My jaw tightened. Abandoned her? I built a life across the country, a life free from her suffocating manipulation. I had a good job, a quiet apartment, and a sense of peace I'd never known under her roof. This wasn't abandonment, it was self-preservation. But the house was different. It was the last tangible link to a childhood that, despite Elizabeth, still held some fragmented good memories. My grandparents' garden, the creaky stairs, the view of the old oak tree from my bedroom window. A cold dread settled over me. If she was claiming I refused it, did that mean she had actually sold it? And if so, why was she lying about the circumstances? I closed the messaging app and opened my browser. I knew the address by heart. Public property records are surprisingly easy to access online. I typed in the street name, the house number. My fingers trembled slightly as the search results loaded. There it was. My childhood home. The address, the parcel number, the last sale date. My eyes scanned the details, searching for the sale price. And then I saw it. Sale price, $7. My breath hitched. $7? That couldn't be right. A typo, maybe. I refreshed the page, checked another public records site. Same thing. $7. It was a joke, a slap in the face. I scrolled down further, looking at the transaction history. The The buyer's name was listed, but I didn't recognise it immediately. Then, a second entry, just weeks later. Another sale. This time, the price made my stomach drop into my shoes. Sale price, gaunt 200,000 ringed. $1.2 million. My childhood home, sold for $7, then flipped for $1.25 million just weeks later. And Elizabeth was out there on social media telling everyone I had refused it. The knot in my stomach turned into a hard, cold stone. This wasn't just another one of Elizabeth's petty lies. This was something far darker. This was fraud. And I knew with a chilling certainty that I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not this time. The $7 sale price stared back at me, mocking. Then the $1.2 million flip just weeks later. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't from fear. It was a cold, simmering rage. This wasn't just a lie, it was a calculated theft. My mother, Elizabeth, 58, had always been a master manipulator, but this was a whole new level of brazen. I snatched up my phone and called Olive, my cousin. She answered on the second ring, her voice a little sleepy. It was late where she was, but I couldn't wait. "Olive, you will not believe this," I blurted out, skipping any pleasantries. "The house. I looked up the public records. She sold it for $7. There was a beat of silence on the other end. $7? Maureen, are you serious? Olive, 29, sounded wide awake now. Dead serious, and then it was flipped weeks later for $1.2 million. $1.2 million, Olive, while she's out there telling everyone I refused it. Oh my God, Olive whispered. Who bought it for $7? Was it a family transfer or something? No, that's the other thing. The buyer's name is Scott Ford. Another pause. Scott Ford? Wait, Elizabeth's friend Scott? The one she's always going on about, the dear friend who helped her with financial advice? My mind reeled. Scott Ford, of course. He was 61, a man Elizabeth had known for years, always hovering in the background, offering unsolicited wisdom, and occasionally lending her money for things she claimed were emergencies. I remembered him as a slick, overly tanned guy with a booming laugh that never quite reached his eyes. Elizabeth always introduced him as just a friend, but there was always something a little too cosy about their interactions, even when I was a kid. Yeah, that's Scott, I confirmed, my voice tight. The one she always said was like family, the one who was always helping her out. That explains so much, Olive said, her voice grim. Remember how she used to talk about creative solutions for taxes or finding loopholes for property? She'd always bring him up. I did remember. Flashbacks hit me. Elizabeth, sitting at the kitchen table maybe 5 years ago, on the phone with Scott. She'd be whispering, but her voice carried. No, no, we can't put it in my name, Scott. It has to look like a clean break. Maureen. Well, Maureen won't be an issue. She's across the country. At the time, I'd dismissed it as typical Elizabeth drama, probably about some minor financial scheme. Now, it felt like a chilling premonition. And she was always so cagey about the house after I moved out, I added. Any time I asked if she was going to sell it, she'd get defensive, say it was too complicated or not the right time. She never once mentioned selling it for $7 to Scott. Because it wasn't a real sale, was it? Olive mused. It was a transfer, a way to get it out of her name without it looking like a gift or a sale that would trigger taxes or something. And then Scott flips it. And they split the profit. That's the only thing that makes sense, I agreed, my mind racing. But why? Why now? And why the public lie about me refusing it? Well, there have been rumours, Olive said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Elizabeth's been looking at luxury beach condos, like really high-end stuff. My mom, Aunt Harmony, 55, mentioned it to me last week. She said Elizabeth was talking about finally getting the life she deserved and how she was almost there with a down payment on a place with an ocean view. A luxury beach condo? Of course. While I was busting my ass in a small apartment, she was plotting to live large off my inheritance, off my childhood home. The audacity was breathtaking. Okay, so it all connects, I said, a plan starting to form in my mind. She needed a chunk of cash, and this was her way of getting it without anyone questioning her. And the lie about me? That's just classic Elizabeth, making herself the victim, covering her tracks. So what are you going to do? Olive asked, her voice full of a mixture of shock and concern. I don't know yet, I admitted, though a fierce resolve was hardening inside me. But I'm not letting this go. This isn't just about the money, Olive. This is about her trying to erase me, to rewrite history, to steal my past and profit from it, and then lie about it to the entire family. I hung up with Olive, my thoughts a whirlwind. I needed more proof. I started digging through old emails, old cloud backups, anything. I was methodical, searching for keywords: Scott, house, property, sale, money. Hours passed. My eyes were burning, but I kept going. And then I found it. Tucked away in an old phone backup, a text message from Elizabeth. It was from about 3 years ago, a time when she was still occasionally sending me random, often passive-aggressive messages. This one was clearly meant for someone else, probably Scott. It had been sent to me by mistake, a jumble of letters and numbers, followed by a sentence that made my blood run cold. Scott'll get it in his name, MBD. Maureen doesn't matter. MBD, no big deal. Maureen doesn't matter. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a confession. A casual dismissal of my existence, my rights, my connection to the home, all wrapped up in a tidy little package of fraud. This wasn't just about the house anymore, this was personal, and I had the receipt. Scott'll get it in his name, MBD. Maureen doesn't matter. That text message, accidentally sent to me by my mother, Elizabeth, 3 years ago, was the final piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just proof, it was a declaration, a casual dismissal of my existence, my rights, my connection to the home. It solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about the house anymore, this was personal, and I had the receipt. The next morning I was on the phone, not with Olive this time, but with a real estate attorney. I'd spent the night researching, looking for someone sharp, methodical, and with a reputation for handling complex property disputes. I found Zachary Young. His online profile listed him as 37, with a focus on real estate and fraud cases, and glowing reviews that emphasised his calm demeanour and fierce courtroom presence. He sounded exactly like what I needed. His assistant scheduled a virtual consultation for that afternoon. I spent the intervening hours meticulously organising everything: the screenshots Olive sent, the public property records showing the $7 sale and the $1.2 million flip, and most damning of all, Elizabeth's accidental text. I even dug up old photos of the house, proof of my childhood there, though I knew that was more for my own emotional validation than legal necessity. When Zachary Young's face appeared on my screen, he looked exactly as his profile described: composed, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He listened patiently, taking notes as I laid out the entire story, from Elizabeth's online lies to the suspicious property records and the damning text. So your mother, Elizabeth Dunn, transferred the property to a Scott Ford for a nominal fee of $7, Zachary summarised, his voice calm. And then Mr. Ford flipped it for a significant profit weeks later. And you have this text message suggesting a pre-arranged agreement to cut you out. Exactly, I confirmed, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. The house was my grandparents' before her. It was always understood it would pass down. She never offered it to me, never discussed selling it. Just suddenly, it's gone, and she's lying about why. And you were 18 when you moved out, correct? He asked. So you were a legal adult, but still very much impacted by this, especially given the family history of the property. Yes, I said. I was 18 and I needed to get away from her, but that doesn't mean I abandoned my claim to the house. She never even mentioned selling it until after the fact, and then only to lie about it. Zachary nodded slowly. This looks like a clear case of fraudulent transfer, potentially conspiracy, and possibly even forgery if your name was involved in any official documents without your consent. We need to dig deeper into the deed transfer itself. Often, in cases like this, they'll try to create a paper trail that looks legitimate on the surface. He explained the process. They would start by subpoenaing all the documents related to both transactions, the $7 sale and the $1.2 million flip. They'd look for any waivers, affidavits, or anything that might have required my signature or acknowledgement. If they forged your signature on a waiver of ownership, that's a felony, Zachary stated, his eyes sharp. That's where we hit them hardest. Over the next few days, Zachary and his team worked fast. They pulled every piece of paper related to the property, and then the call came. Maureen, Zachary's voice was grave, we found it. A waiver of ownership document, supposedly signed by you, relinquishing your claim to the property. It's dated 2 years ago. My blood ran cold. My signature? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. But I never signed anything like that. I never even saw a document like that. No, you didn't, he confirmed. It's a digital signature, but it's clearly falsified. The metadata shows it was created on a device not associated with you, and the IP address traces back to a location near your mother's home. We have a forensic expert who can confirm it's a forgery. A forged digital signature. Elizabeth had gone that far. It was a calculated criminal act. The casual "Maureen doesn't matter" text now felt even more chilling. She truly believed she could get away with anything, but there was more. As I was going through my old phone backups, looking for anything related to the house, I stumbled upon a folder of old voice recordings. I'd forgotten I even had them. They were from an old smartphone I used years ago, a habit I had of recording important calls or conversations, mostly for my own memory, never imagining they'd be used for something like this. I started listening, scrolling through dates. And then I found it. A call from roughly 4 years ago, between Elizabeth and someone whose voice I didn't recognise, but it sounded like a lawyer or a financial advisor. Elizabeth's voice, clear as day. So, if I transfer it to a trust, or a friend, for a symbolic amount, does that avoid the inheritance tax later? And what about Maureen? Does she have any claim if it's not technically sold to a third party but just transferred? The other voice, a man's, was muffled but discernible. It's a grey area. A gift could be challenged. A sale, even a low one, makes it harder. But if there's a clear paper trail, and if the beneficiary, in this case your daughter, has no documented claim or has signed a waiver, it's much cleaner. Elizabeth again. And the waiver, can that be done remotely? Digitally? The muffled voice. Yes, with proper authentication, but it must be legally binding. Elizabeth. Right, legally binding, of course. Her tone was dismissive, almost amused. I played the recording for Zachary. He listened, his expression unreadable. When it finished, he leaned back. This is excellent, Maureen. This shows premeditation. It shows she was actively seeking ways to circumvent legal processes and cut you out. Combined with the forged waiver, the text message, and the property records, we have a very strong case for fraud, conspiracy, and potentially felony forgery. The anger that had been simmering inside me for days finally reached a boiling point. My mother, Elizabeth, had not just sold my home. She had meticulously planned to steal it, to erase my connection to it, and then lied about it to the entire family. She had used my trust, my absence, and her own twisted charm to commit a crime. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from a family group chat. Elizabeth had just posted a photo. She was smiling, arm in arm with Scott Ford, standing on a balcony overlooking a sparkling ocean. The caption read, "Finally ours, so excited for this new chapter." My new chapter was just beginning too, and it was going to be a reckoning. Finally ours, so excited for this new chapter. Elizabeth's post, flaunting her new luxury condo with Scott Ford, felt like a direct taunt. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she'd won. But I had the forged waiver, the damning text, and the recording of her discussing legal loopholes. Zachary Young, my attorney, had confirmed it. We had a strong case for fraud, conspiracy, and felony forgery. The next morning, I booked a flight. It was a surprise. I hadn't been back to my hometown in years, not since I was 18, and fled Elizabeth's suffocating manipulation. Now, 14 years later, I was returning at 32, not as a defeated escapee, but as a woman armed with evidence and a burning desire for justice. I didn't tell anyone I was coming, not even Olive, my cousin, until my plane was boarding. A quick text. "Landing in a few hours. Can I crash at your place? Need your help." Olive, 29, was waiting for me at the airport, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Maureen, I can't believe you're here." "What's the plan?" "The plan is to gather more evidence, quietly," I said, my voice low as we walked through the bustling terminal. "Zachary is working on the legal end, but I need to tie up some loose ends here, and I need your help, especially with Bella." Olive nodded. "Bella Ford, Scott's daughter, why her?" "Zachary's research showed Bella, 34, is a real estate agent in town," I explained, "and she was listed as the buyer's agent on the $1.2 million flip. That's a huge commission. It connects her directly to the fraud." "So you think she was in on it?" Olive asked, her brow furrowed. "I think it's highly likely she was complicit even if she claims ignorance," I replied. "She's a real estate agent. She would have known the $7 sale was bogus, and she profited from the flip. We need to see what she knows, or what she might accidentally reveal. Can you talk to her? Maybe under the pretense of looking for a place, or just catching up?" Olive bit her lip. "It's risky." Bella and Elizabeth are pretty close, actually. Elizabeth always loved how driven Bella was. "I know," I said, "but it's a risk we need to take. We need to connect Scott and Bella directly to Elizabeth, beyond just the property records. Any conversations, any hints they might have dropped." Olive agreed, albeit reluctantly. "Okay, I'll figure something out." "Maybe I can ask her about investment properties or something." The next day, while Olive worked on her plan, I decided to take a calculated risk. I needed to know more about the $1.2 million sale. I looked up the real estate agency listed on the public records for the flip. It was a well-known local firm. I walked in, pretending to be a potential buyer, asking about recent sales in the area, specifically mentioning the old Dunn property. A woman with sharp, kind eyes, about 45, introduced herself as Yael Burns. She was the agent who had handled the sale of my childhood home after Scott Ford had bought it for $7. I feigned casual interest, asking about the market, the speed of sales, trying to get a feel for how much she knew. She was professional, giving me general information, but nothing specific about that particular transaction. I didn't push it. I simply left my name and number, saying I was just looking for now. I didn't expect anything to come of it. But later that afternoon my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Maureen Dunn?" a woman's voice asked. It was Yael Burns. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Yes, this is Maureen." "This is Yael Burns, from real estate agency name," she said, her voice lower now, more serious. "I think we need to talk, privately." I agreed, my mind racing. We arranged to meet at a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of town. I arrived first, my nerves frayed. Yael walked in a few minutes later, carrying a large, nondescript envelope. "Look," she began, sliding the envelope across the table. "I saw your name on the property records from years ago, and then I saw the online drama with your mother, Elizabeth, and I put two and two together. What happened with that house? It didn't sit right with me. I opened the envelope. Inside were copies of documents, the original listing agreement for the $1.2 million sale, the purchase agreement, and most importantly, bank wire transfer confirmations. Scott Ford bought that house from your mother for $7, Yoel explained, her voice hushed. That's a red flag right there. Then just weeks later he listed it with us. The sale went through incredibly fast, too fast honestly, but my job is to sell, so I did. She pointed to the wire transfer documents. Here's what really bothered me. I keep meticulous records. Scott Ford received 2 large wire payments totaling $1.15 million into an account that wasn't the closing account for the house sale. And these payments, they were dated before the deed transfer from your mother to him even took place. My eyes widened. Before? Yes, Yael confirmed, her gaze steady. The first payment for $600,000 hit his account 3 days before the $7 deed transfer. The second for $550,000 hit the day before. It was like he was already paid for the flip before he even bought the house from your mother. It looked like a prearranged deal, a payout, not a legitimate sale. My mind reeled. This was it. Irrefutable proof of a conspiracy. Elizabeth had been paid her share of the $1.2 million. Before the house was even legally transferred from her name to Scott's. It wasn't just a fraudulent transfer, it was a premeditated scheme, a money laundering operation disguised as a property sale. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Yoel sighed, looking tired. Because it's wrong. I've been in this business a long time. I've seen shady deals, but this felt like a direct theft. And seeing your mother's posts online, blaming you, when I knew the real story, I couldn't just sit on it. I have a conscience. She slid a business card across the table. My contact information. I'll testify if you need me to. I have all the original documents too. I looked at the documents, then at Yael. A whistleblower, an unexpected ally. This was more than I could have hoped for. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture of undeniable brazen fraud. Elizabeth and Scott hadn't just stolen the house. They had orchestrated a complex scheme, and now I had the evidence to prove it. The coffee shop meeting with Yael Burns, the real estate agent, had been a game-changer. Her revelation about the $1.15 million wired to Scott Ford before the $7 deed transfer was the smoking gun. It proved premeditation, a clear conspiracy between Elizabeth and Scott. I had the forged waiver, the damning text, the call recording, and now a whistleblower with irrefutable financial records. Zachary Young, my attorney, would be thrilled. I spent the next few days working closely with Zachary, sending him everything Yael had given me. He confirmed what I already knew. This was solid. He started preparing the initial filings, but I knew the legal process would take time. I wanted to confront Elizabeth sooner. I wanted to expose her lies to the family that had always believed her, the family she was still actively manipulating with her Maureen abandoned me narrative. The perfect opportunity arose. My Aunt Harmony's 55th birthday party. Harmony, Elizabeth's sister, was passive but loyal to family, and her birthday was always a big, well-attended affair. Elizabeth, 58, would be there, basking in the attention, no doubt spinning more tales of her struggles and her new chapter in the luxury condo. Olive, 29, was nervous. "Are you sure about this, Maureen? It's going to be a scene." "That's the point," I said, my voice calm but firm. "She's made a scene for years, just not one where she's the villain. It's time for the truth." I arrived at the party with Olive, carrying a large tote bag. The backyard was filled with familiar faces, most of whom I hadn't seen in years. There was Aunt Harmony, beaming, surrounded by well-wishers. And there, holding court by the patio, was Elizabeth, looking perfectly coiffed, laughing a little too loudly at something Scott Ford, 61, was saying. Bella Ford, 34, Scott's daughter, was nearby, chatting with some of my younger cousins. A wave of nausea hit me, quickly replaced by a surge of cold determination. This was it. I walked straight towards Elizabeth, Olive trailing a nervous step behind me. As I got closer, Elizabeth's eyes met mine. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of shock, then quickly a practiced look of concern. "Maureen, what a surprise!" she exclaimed, her voice pitched to Carrie. "I had no idea you were coming. Are you here for Harmony's birthday?" I stopped a few feet from her, close enough for my voice to be heard by those around us, but not so loud as to cause an immediate commotion. My eyes locked with hers. "How much does betrayal cost these days, Mother?" I asked, my voice low and steady, cutting through the party chatter like a knife. Elizabeth's face went rigid. Scott, standing next to her, shifted uncomfortably. A few nearby conversations died down. "Maureen, what are you talking about?" Elizabeth feigned confusion, her eyes darting around, seeking allies. "You're being dramatic. Are you feeling all right? You know, you always were so sensitive." "Sensitive?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Is that what you call it when someone discovers you sold their childhood home for $7, then flipped it for $1.2 million, all while telling everyone I refused it?" A gasp rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. Aunt Harmony looked aghast. Sophie Roberts, 27, another cousin who used to side with Elizabeth, stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Elizabeth's composure cracked, but only for a second. She quickly regrouped, her voice rising in pitch, becoming shrill. "This is ridiculous, Maureen. You're making things up. You're just bitter because you abandoned us, abandoned the house. I had no choice but to sell it." "You left me with nothing." "Nothing?" I retorted, pulling a stack of neatly organised packets from my tote bag. "Is that why you're living in a luxury condo now, bought with the proceeds of your fraud?" I started handing out the packets to the closest family members, to Aunt Harmony, to Sophie, to my other aunts and uncles. Each packet contained copies of the public property records showing the $7 sale and the $1.2 million flip, the forged waiver of ownership with my falsified digital signature, the transcript of Elizabeth's "Maureen doesn't matter" text, and the details from Yael Burns about the pre-deed wire transfers to Scott. "These are the receipts," I announced, my voice clear and strong. "The timestamps, the forged documents, the financial records. My mother, Elizabeth Dunn, conspired with Scott Ford to defraud me of my inheritance. She sold my home for $7, then he flipped it for $1.25 million, and she lied to all of you, claiming I refused it, to cover her tracks." A stunned silence fell over the patio. Family members, usually so quick to defend Elizabeth, were now poring over the documents, their faces a mixture of disbelief and horror. Sophie Roberts, who had been reading the forged waiver, suddenly let out a strangled cry. Her eyes, wide and tearful, fixed on a line at the bottom of the document. "My signature," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I signed this, as a witness, but I don't remember signing anything like this. I thought I was just signing a petition for Aunt Elizabeth's community garden project." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Sophie, unknowingly, had been complicit. Elizabeth had tricked her into signing a fraudulent document. Elizabeth's face contorted. The mask of the long-suffering victim shattered completely. Her eyes, usually so calculating, now blazed with pure, unadulterated rage. She lunged at me, her hand raised, aiming for my face. "You little bitch!" she shrieked, her voice raw with fury. "How dare you? How dare you come here and ruin everything?" Before her hand could connect, Scott grabbed her arm, pulling her back. But it was too late. The entire scene, Elizabeth's lunge, her contorted face, her furious shriek, was caught on multiple cell phones. Several family members, including Olive, had instinctively pulled out their phones and started recording the moment the confrontation began. The truth, raw and undeniable, was now out in the open, and it was going to be impossible for Elizabeth to spin this away. Elizabeth's lunge, her raw shriek of "You little bitch," was the final ugly act in her carefully constructed performance. Scott, 61, had pulled her back, but the damage was done. Multiple cell phones, instinctively raised by shocked family members, had captured the entire meltdown. The carefully curated image of the long-suffering matriarch, the victim of her ungrateful daughter, shattered into a million pieces. Within hours, the video of Elizabeth's outburst, coupled with the packets of evidence I'd handed out, went viral within our extended family and local community groups. My cousin Olive, 29, who had recorded it from a perfect angle, shared it widely, adding her own commentary about Elizabeth's years of manipulation. The comments section exploded. People who had always defended Elizabeth, who had bought into her narrative, were now questioning everything. Aunt Harmony, 55, Elizabeth's sister, called me the next morning, her voice shaking. "Maureen, I don't know what to say. I saw the documents. Sophie called me crying. She said Elizabeth tricked her into signing that waiver. She thought it was for a community garden. My own sister. How could she?" Harmony had always been passive, loyal to family, but this was a betrayal too deep for her to ignore. She promised to cooperate fully, to tell her side of the story. Sophie Roberts, 27, my sceptical cousin who used to side with Elizabeth, also reached out. Her voice was raw with tears and anger. "I can't believe I fell for it. She made me feel so bad for you, Maureen, always saying you were so ungrateful, and all this time she was using me." Sophie's unwitting complicity in the forged waiver had hit her hard. She felt violated, used. She, too, vowed to help in any way she could. This was exactly what I had hoped for. The truth, finally, was out. Elizabeth's reign of manipulation was crumbling. Meanwhile, Zachary Young, my attorney, was moving fast. Armed with the new witness testimonies from Yael Burns, Aunt Harmony and Sophie, along with the viral video, he officially filed a comprehensive fraud suit against Elizabeth Dunn and Scott Ford. The complaint detailed the fraudulent transfer, the conspiracy, the forged waiver, and the pre-deed wire transfers. It was a brutal, detailed account of their scheme. Within days, the court issued an order, a temporary asset freeze on Elizabeth's and Scott's known accounts and properties. This meant Elizabeth's newly acquired luxury beach condo, the one she'd so proudly announced was finally ours, was now in jeopardy. The irony was not lost on me. Zachary also brought up something else. "Maureen, remember we talked about Bella Ford, Scott's daughter, being the buying agent on the $1.2 million flip?" "Yes," I said. Olive was going to try and talk to her. "Well, we pulled her commission records for that sale," Zachary continued. "She received a commission of over $30,000. That's a significant amount. Given her father's involvement and the highly suspicious nature of the initial $7 sale, it's highly unlikely she was unaware of the scheme. As a licensed real estate agent, she would have a professional and legal obligation to report such irregularities. Her failure to do so, and her direct profit from the fraudulent flip, makes her complicit." My blood ran cold. Bella, 34, had seemed so innocent, just a successful real estate agent. But she was in on it. She had directly benefited from the fraud. "So, what does this mean?" I asked Zachary. "It means we can escalate the suit," he replied, his voice firm. "We can amend the complaint to include Bella Ford as a co-conspirator. This strengthens our case significantly, proving a wider network of fraud and making it harder for Elizabeth or Scott to claim they acted alone, or that Bella was just an innocent agent." "Do it," I said without hesitation. "Include her. She knew. She profited." The amended suit was filed, adding Bella Ford to the list of defendants. The news spread quickly, even reaching the local news outlets, though they didn't name names yet, only hinting at a high-profile family property dispute involving alleged fraud. The pressure on Elizabeth, Scott, and now Bella was immense. Elizabeth tried to call me. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was a mix of outrage and thinly veiled threats. Maureen, you are going to regret this. You're ruining everything. This is a family matter, and you're making a spectacle. I smiled grimly. A spectacle was exactly what I wanted. She had made a spectacle of me for years, painting me as the villain. Now it was her turn. The asset freeze meant her dream condo was on hold, her ill-gotten gains locked down. The legal system was moving, slowly but surely, to dismantle her carefully constructed world. And with Bella now implicated, the web of deceit was unravelling for everyone to see. The fraud suit against Elizabeth Dunn, Scott Ford, and now Bella Ford moved swiftly through the courts. The viral video of Elizabeth's meltdown at Aunt Harmony's party, coupled with the detailed evidence Zachary Young had compiled, had created a public and legal firestorm. The asset freeze on Elizabeth's and Scott's accounts meant her dream condo was indefinitely on hold, a constant reminder of her unravelling scheme. I sat beside Zachary, 37, in the courtroom, feeling a strange mix of calm and anticipation. It had been weeks since the party, weeks of legal filings, depositions, and the slow, grinding machinery of justice. Elizabeth, 58, looked drawn, her usual polished facade replaced by a brittle anxiety. Scott, 61, looked grim, his slick confidence gone. Bella, 34, sat beside her father, pale and visibly nervous. The court hearings began. Zachary was methodical, presenting the evidence like a skilled surgeon. He started with the public records. The $7 sale, the immediate $1.2 million flip. Then came the forged waiver of ownership with my falsified digital signature. The forensic expert testified, confirming the forgery and tracing its origin to a device near Elizabeth's home. Next, the call recordings from my old phone back up. Elizabeth's voice, clear and chilling, discussing how to skirt legal loopholes and whether I, Maureen, had any claim if it's not technically sold to a third party but just transferred. The judge listened intently, his expression unreadable. Then came the testimonies. Yael Burns, 45, the real estate agent, took the stand. She calmly presented her meticulous records, detailing how Scott Ford received $115 million in wire payments before the $7 deed transfer from Elizabeth even took place. Her testimony was devastating, proving a premeditated conspiracy. Aunt Harmony, 55, testified next, her voice shaky but firm. She recounted Elizabeth's years of financial manoeuvring and her shock at seeing the evidence of the fraud. Then Sophie Roberts, 27, tearfully explained how Elizabeth had tricked her into signing the forged waiver, believing it was for a community garden petition. Her innocent complicity painted Elizabeth in an even darker light. Elizabeth's lawyer tried to discredit me, painting me as a bitter, estranged daughter seeking revenge. But Zachary expertly countered, using Elizabeth's own online posts about me refusing the home as further proof of her manipulative nature and intent to deceive. Mid-trial, Elizabeth's lawyer approached Zachary and me during a recess. "My client is willing to settle," he said, his voice low. "She's prepared to offer a significant sum to make this go away. We can keep this out of the public eye, avoid further embarrassment." Elizabeth herself came over, looking directly at me, her eyes pleading. For the first time I saw genuine fear in them, not just anger. "Maureen," she whispered, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "Please, we're family." "We can keep this in the family. Don't do this to me. Think of the family name." The family name. The same family name she had dragged through the mud with her lies and fraud. The same family she had tricked and manipulated. The same family she had abandoned me to years ago. I met her gaze, my own eyes cold and unwavering. "No," I said, my voice clear and firm. "There's nothing left to keep in the family. You broke that trust years ago. This isn't about money anymore, Elizabeth. This is about justice. Her face crumpled, the last vestiges of her charming facade shattered. She looked utterly defeated, exposed. It was the first time I had ever seen her truly vulnerable, truly broken. Not angry, not manipulative, just a woman who had lost control. The trial resumed. The defence presented a weak case, attempting to paint the $7 transfer as a legitimate gift, and the subsequent flip as Scott's independent business venture. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the call recordings, the wire transfer timestamps, and the compelling testimonies of Yael, Harmony, and Sophie. The judge, after hearing all the arguments, delivered his verdict. It was swift, decisive, and vindicating. Elizabeth Dunn was found liable for fraudulent transfer, conspiracy to commit fraud and forgery. She was ordered to pay substantial damages to me, covering not just the value of the house, but also punitive damages for the emotional distress and the costs of the legal battle. Her luxury condo, already under asset freeze, was officially seized to satisfy the judgment. It would be sold at auction. Scott Ford and Bella Ford were also found liable for conspiracy to commit fraud and were facing separate criminal charges, which would be pursued by the District Attorney's Office based on the evidence presented in this civil trial. Their real estate licenses were immediately suspended. A wave of relief washed over me, so profound it almost buckled my knees. It wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about seeing the truth prevail, about Elizabeth finally facing consequences for her actions. As I walked out of the courtroom, Zachary by my side, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The weight of her manipulation, the constant need to justify myself, was gone. Later that week, Zachary called me. "The condo is going up for auction next month," he said. "It's part of the assets seized to satisfy the judgment. You have the right to bid, of course, but it will be a public auction." A thought, a mischievous, deeply satisfying thought sparked in my mind. Elizabeth's dream condo, the one she'd proudly declared was finally ours. "I'll be there," I told Zachary, "and I'm going to bid on it." Weeks later, the auction for Elizabeth's seized condo took place. I attended anonymously, bidding through an agent. The bidding was fierce, but I held my ground. When the hammer finally fell, I closed my hand around a small, cold metal object. A key. The winning bid was mine. Elizabeth's new chapter was now my new chapter. The key felt surprisingly heavy in my palm. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was the culmination of years of quiet suffering, months of relentless pursuit, and the final, undeniable proof that I had reclaimed what was mine. Not just the house, but my voice, my truth, and my peace. A few weeks after the auction, I drove to the coast, Olive, 29, riding shotgun. The ocean air, salty and fresh, filled the car as we got closer to the address. Elizabeth's dream condo, seized to satisfy the judgment against her, was now mine. The legal battles were over, the court orders finalised. Elizabeth, 58, was left with nothing but her shattered reputation and the consequences of her fraud. Scott, 61, and Bella, 34, were facing their own legal battles, their real estate licenses suspended, their names tarnished. We pulled up to the building, a sleek modern structure overlooking the vast expanse of the Atlantic. My heart beat a steady rhythm, not of anger, but of quiet triumph. I unlocked the heavy front door, the click echoing in the silence. The condo was empty, stripped bare, no furniture, no personal touches. Just white walls, gleaming floors, and the breathtaking view of the ocean from the expansive balcony. It was a blank canvas, devoid of Elizabeth's toxic energy. "Wow," Olive breathed, stepping onto the balcony. "It's incredible." I walked through the rooms, a small smile playing on my lips. This wasn't the childhood home, but it was a symbol. a tangible representation of justice served. I envisioned it filled with blues and whites, echoing the ocean outside. A calm, peaceful space. Over the next few days, I did just that. I bought new furniture, simple and clean. I painted the walls soft blues, hung sheer white curtains that billowed in the sea breeze. I placed a small scented candle on the windowsill overlooking the ocean, its gentle flame flickering, a beacon of new beginnings. As I watched the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues, I reflected on the journey. It wasn't about revenge. Not until she made it personal, until she tried to erase me, to profit from my past, and then lie about it to everyone. But then it became justice. It became about reclaiming my narrative, about showing the family and myself that her manipulation didn't define me. The consequences for Elizabeth were far-reaching. Sophie Roberts, 27, who had unknowingly signed the forged waiver, had completely cut ties. Her family, once staunch defenders of Elizabeth, had ostracised her, disgusted by her actions and her willingness to trick even her own relatives. Aunt Harmony, 55, while still my mother's sister, maintained a strict distance, her loyalty to Elizabeth irrevocably broken. The family, once so easily swayed by Elizabeth's victim narrative, now saw her for what she was. Bella Ford, 34, had tried to reach out a few times, sending texts and emails, attempting to apologise, to explain her involvement. I blocked her. There was nothing to explain. She was a real estate agent who knew the law, and she chose to profit from fraud. Her actions, like her father's, were a choice. My own life across the country felt lighter, freer. The constant hum of Elizabeth's potential manipulations, the low-level anxiety she'd instilled in me, had finally dissipated. I could breathe, I could build, let her find her own shelter this time. I've reclaimed mine.